Welcome to Age, Pension, Super and Retirement. I am your host Yvonne, and as always this is information only and not personal advice. Today we are going to look at the carer payment and the carer allowance, and someone who knows a lot about all this is Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, interesting. Today we're going to be talking about something that's not really age pension, but more applicable to any age.
I like it. I like that we're going broad, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who, if not them, they might know someone who may find this information quite helpful. If I could begin by asking, what actually is the carer payment?
So the carer payment is a pension. So it's similar to age pension and disability support pension in that, it's a pension. It's paid at the same rate as those other pensions. It has income and assets testing. It comes with a pensioner concession card. It's paid in recognition of the fact that you can't support yourself properly because of your role in caring for someone. So it's an income support payment, it's a pension, and it's paid for people who can't work full time because of their role of caring for a loved one with a disability or someone who is frail aged and isn't working full time. You can still do some work on carer payment, but you can't be working full time.
And just on that, Rebecca, is the carer payment a similar amount to the age pension?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So it's exactly the same rate as age pension. One thing is that age pension is always taxable income. Carer payment, if you and the person you care for are under 67 years old, carer payment is tax-free. So it means that you don't pay any income tax on it. But if the person you care for is over 67 or you are over 67 or both, then it's going to be taxable income. But otherwise, it's paid at exactly the same rate as age pension.
Fantastic. Now, what is this carer allowance? I don't see so much about this one.
Yes, so carer allowance, it's tricky because these different terms can be quite confusing. So carer allowance is a supplementary payment. It's paid in addition to an income support payment. So in addition to carer payment or in addition to age pension or in addition to parenting payment, or it can be paid when there is no income support payment at all. So maybe because the person has income and assets over the threshold for those pensions, or because the person is working enough to not meet the criteria for carer payment. So carer allowance is $159 per fortnight. There is no adjustment for income and assets. It's either on or off. There is an income limit. So your family income has to be under $250,000 per year to be eligible for carer allowance. And that $250,000 limit is not indexed, so it's been the same since it was introduced in 2018, and it stays the same, $250,000 of adjusted taxable income. So there's a lot more people who are eligible because the income limit is significantly higher than for carer allowance. Carer allowance does not come with any pension card or concession card for the carer. So it doesn't give you any discounts or benefits, but it does give you $159 a fortnight, which is sort of to somewhat compensate for things like transport, driving the person you care for around. It helps to pay for maybe some aids or things that isn't covered by an aged care package or by NDIS. It's really important that it's not to be seen as a wage. You're not being paid per hour of care. If you look at it like that, you'd think it's an absolute pittance, but it's not a wage for caring for someone, and neither is carer payment. So you can't make it equivalent to, I'm being paid this many cents or dollars per hour. It's paid as a recognition of the extra costs that you might have as a carer, or some of the opportunity costs, you can't work as many hours because you're caring. but yeah, it's not a wage. Carer allowance is tax-free. It doesn't count as income at all, so it's a non-assessable, non-exempt income, so you don't declare it on your tax return, and it doesn't affect any other government payments you might be getting. It's just sort of a little bit of extra income. If you're getting carer allowance for a child under 16, then the child will receive a healthcare card, which can be used by the child only to get discounts on medications and things. But there's no concession card for the carer when they're on carer allowance.
That's really interesting. And that non-index 250,000, is that per couple or individual?
It's per couple if you're a couple, or it's individual if you're an individual. So it's just like household income. So yeah, 250,000, the same whether you're single or a couple.
Oh, that's great to know that exists. It's quite generous. Are these payments only for caring for someone with a disability, or could they in fact be for someone who may be elderly or frail?
It can be for both. So if you care for someone with a disability, or if you care for someone who is frail aged, either way, depending on their care needs and what kind of care you are doing, you can be eligible for the carer allowance or the carer payment.
That's interesting as well. And do you need to live with the person that you are caring for?
No, but you need to live fairly close. So you need to be able to respond fairly quickly in case of, the person needing you. If you live with the person, Centrelink assumes that you are, providing care pretty much all the time. And, there's a degree of supervision going on when you're living with the person. So for carer allowance, when you're doing the claim, if you live with a person, there's certain questions that they don't ask about because they just kind of assume that, well, you're living there in the same house, so you're going to be providing a certain level of and a certain number of hours of support. If you don't live with the person, for carer allowance, you need to show that you're doing at least 20 hours a week of personal care. And that 20 hours has to be some hours every day. So it's 7 days a week care required and 20 hours at least per week. So that might be, popping in for an hour every morning and then some days being there longer. It doesn't mean like 3 hours every day, but it means at least some time every day and then some days longer so that it makes up to at least 20 hours. For carer payment, again, you don't need to be living with the person, but for carer payment, you need to show that at least you're providing substantive care that is equivalent to a full-time job in terms of the number of hours. So they're sort of looking at least 35 hours a week of care. So that's like 5 hours a day on average. Again, it doesn't have to be the same amount of hours every day, but it needs to be enough that it looks like, you couldn't hold down a full-time job and do this care because the care is taking up so much of your time.
So just to be clear, anyone who gets a carer payment, would they necessarily also get this allowance, or does that depend?
It's sort of a bit confusing. So when you're applying for carer payment and allowance for an adult, so for somebody who is 16 years of age or older, when you look at the care needs assessment, there's all these questions about their physical care needs, their cognitive care needs, and then their behavioural needs. And each criteria is given a certain score. And to get carer payment, you need to score at least 10 points. And to get carer allowance, you need to score at least 12 points. Now, sometimes it kind of seems a bit backwards because the carer allowance payment is less than the carer payment amount. It's not actually backwards because it's kind of like saying, so somebody who qualifies based on income and assets for carer payment is going to get, a larger amount of money, but they're not working, they don't have much money, so they sort of really need that income support payment whereas the carer allowance amount is $159. And yes, it's a smaller amount than carer payment could possibly be. But if you've got a family on $150,000, they don't really need that extra money if they're just doing a little bit of care. So the care requirement is higher for carer allowance. And yeah, I think it does make sense, because it means that for those families with higher income, or couples or individuals with higher income, to show that you need that payment, you need to show that you're providing quite a high level of care. So no, they don't always go hand in hand. So some people will qualify for carer payment, but not carer allowance. And some people will qualify for carer allowance, but not carer payment.
That makes sense, especially with the different income limits between the two. You mentioned work restrictions. What are the actual work restrictions for, I think it was you said for the carer payment there were work restrictions?
Yes, so carer allowance does not have any work restrictions. So you can be working full time and claim carer allowance. For carer payment, you can do some work, but the limit is 25 hours a week. Now, there's some changes recently, just this year, that changed the work rules for carer payment. So previously it was a strict 25 hours a week, and they included travel time to work, they included meal breaks, and they included study at, if you were at a TAFE course or something, they counted all of that in the 25 hours per week. They brought in some new rules in March this year, and they have relaxed that requirement quite a bit. So now study or education hours do not count towards the 25 hours. Travel to work does not count. Meal breaks do not count. So it's just actual work hours. So the limit is 25 hours per week. But again, the rules that began in March have been more generous, and it allows, instead of being a strict 25 hours per week, it is now 100 hours over 4 weeks. And some people say, well, that's not exactly the same thing, but it's not, because somebody could be working, say they're working 15 hours a week on a regular basis. So they're, under 25 hours, but maybe they pick up some extra shifts from time to time. And in week 1, perhaps they work 40 hours because, they've been given these shifts and things going okay with the person they care for, and they've got the opportunity to do these extra hours. So they can work 40 hours in that first week, and then 15 hours the next and the next and the next. And because the total hours are under 100, there is no impact on their eligibility for carer payment. And then there's some rules about respite days. So previously, I'll probably start back a bit. So when you're on carer payment and carer allowance, you're allowed to have a break from your caring role for up to 63 days per calendar year. So that allows for, caring is full on. And if you're not able to take any breaks, it leads to carer burnout and leads to people being placed in nursing homes or institutions because the carer is just had it. So the respite rules mean that the carer can maybe go overseas for a holiday without the person they care for. The person they care for maybe can go into residential respite for a couple of weeks, and that may be provided for in your home care package or your NDIS package. So the person who needs care is cared for in a different way, and the carer can have a break, whether that's going away overseas or just having a break at home. You can do that for up to 63 days per calendar year. And the work hours, again, if you're going to do more than 100 hours in that 4-week period, you're now allowed to use single respite days to work more than 100 hours. So if in a 4-week period you worked 107 hours, the extra 7 hours can just be offset by one respite day. So you just use one of your bank of respite days to do that, and they don't kick you off carer payment. It's kind of like the rules are there's a lot of nitty gritty in the rules, but basically it helps more people to stay on carer payment while they're trying different work options, while they're, working a short stint of work to get a bit of extra income, things like that. It just makes it a lot more flexible and means fewer people are being cut off carer payment, and there's more opportunities for people to do more of what they want to do and provide for themselves.
Fantastic. Such a full and helpful response. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Now, you mentioned, I believe, for the carer allowance that there was this $250,000 a year income test and I believe no assets test. What is the income and assets test for the carer payment?
So the carer payment asset and income testing follows the same as age pension and disability support pension. So the asset limits differ based on whether you're single or partnered, whether you own your home or don't own your home. The asset limits, they're quite generous. For carer payment, the asset limits are for homeowners, singles, the asset limit is $714,500, and couples, $1,074,000. These are the asset limits as of September 2025. And for non-homeowners, the asset limits are higher than that. And the income limits for singles is $2,575 per fortnight, and for couples is $3,934 per fortnight. So these are the limits as of September 2025, and they are adjusted every 6 months in line with inflation.
Fantastic, Rebecca. And what about the income and assets test for the caree, the person being cared for?
Good question. So this one, for most people, it's not an issue because I think most people caring for someone, the person might be elderly on age pension or they're younger and they're on disability pension. So most of the time this is not an issue, but there is a income and asset test for the person you care for carer payment. And the asset and income test is fairly generous, but there are some people who won't be eligible. So maybe you're caring for your elderly parent and maybe they're quite wealthy. If they're not on age pension, they'll need to do this income and asset test, and they may have assets and income too high for you to be able to claim carer payment. So in that situation, you can still claim carer allowance because there's no income and asset test for the person being cared for carer allowance. So yeah, you can still get carer allowance, and you're going to have to work out a different way of being compensated for your role in that situation. I guess it's just a reminder that Centrelink doesn't cover every situation. There are some situations where it's up to the individual to figure it out. If you're caring for someone in your family who is reasonably wealthy, I guess you're just going to have to talk to them about how you're going to be compensated for that, whether you're going to be paid like a wage or have your living expenses covered, or maybe you're going to get a bigger share of the inheritance because of what you're doing. It needs to be sort of sorted out privately. And the other situation is where if you're caring for somebody, for your child, the income and asset tests apply to the child being cared for. And because the child doesn't usually have their own income and assets, they look at the family income and assets. So this is a tricky one because sometimes you've got a situation where a couple might be, maybe the family, they're both working and their income is maybe it's $150,000, $160,000 combined, and then the child develops an illness or a disability or has a big accident and a care need starts, and one of the parents has to give up work. So their income has dropped, and they would be, with the new income, under the carer payment income test. But when they're looking at the child's income, they look at the annual income, and they'll look at the child's income and go, oh, well, you guys, your parents, the child's parents earned $150,000, $160,000. So therefore the child's income is too high for carer payment. Now, this is a tricky one because it's like, well, yes, the child's income was high, but now the fortnightly income is low. So there's some situations where you might actually have to wait until the financial year has elapsed and then you can apply for carer payment. So that's just like I guess a quirk of the legislation that does that. For children, if there's a young child who's had a care need develop, there is another payment that we're not really talking about today called the carer adjustment payment that you might be eligible for. So if you're listening and you've got a young child who has a care need and you've had to reduce your work hours, your income's dropped because of the new care need, have a look into that one, the carer adjustment payment. You might be eligible for that when you're not eligible for carer payment.
Such valuable information. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I'm wondering, can someone claim for caring for more than one person?
Yes. If you care for 2 people over 16, you can claim carer allowance for both of them. The carer payment is a pension, and so it's an income support payment. A person can only ever get one income support payment because that's the payment for you because you can't work. But the carer allowance is paid based on the person that you're caring for. So if you care for 2 people who have disabilities, or maybe you care for both of your elderly parents and they both have care needs, you can claim carer allowance for both, so twice, but carer payment is only paid once.
Terrific, Rebecca. And finally, are there minimum time periods that care is expected to be required?
Yes. For carer payment, so that's the pension, it needs to be shown that the care is going to be required for at least 6 months. If the person needing care is terminally ill, then you don't need to show that because maybe their life expectancy is less than 6 months, you don't need to show that it's going to be for 6 months or more. You can just tick the terminally ill box. But for everyone else, yes, for carer payment, it needs to be shown that the care is required for at least 6 months. So this is not a suitable payment for someone who, like say your dad's going to have a knee replacement and is going to need some extra care for 6 weeks. This is not an appropriate payment for that kind of situation. Or if your husband has had a car accident and needs care for 3 months, this is not an appropriate payment. But if it's 6 months or longer, you can apply. And for carer allowance, it's 12 months or longer. Now, these are things that the doctor or other health professional will note in their medical report. So when you do a claim for carer payment or carer allowance, there's your part of the claim, which is your demographic details and your income and asset details. And then there's a medical report, which needs to be completed by the person you care for, their treating health professional, usually their GP. It can be a specialist, and there are some other health professionals that can fill out the form if it's not done by a doctor. And it's really helpful if you can have a copy of the form before you go to the doctor, have a read through the questions, and if you can have an idea of to explain to the doctor, this is what I'm doing for the person with toileting, with dressing, with feeding. These are the things I'm doing, and it'll just help the process go a lot smoother. But don't fill out the form on behalf of the doctor. That's not a good look. But if you have read it beforehand and be prepared for that consultation. And so the other thing is that if you need to bring it to the doctor of the person you care for, not your doctor. So, and that might be the same person or it might be a different person. And for Medicare purposes, make sure that the person who you care for is present at the appointment, because the form is for that person needing care, and Medicare will not pay for the consultation if the person is not present.
This has been an absolute golden episode with so much information. Remember that this is information only and never personal advice. For our international listeners wishing to join our Facebook group, the code word is orange. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was wonderful.
You're welcome. Now, Yvonne, before you go, there's a couple of other things I wanted to mention for this. So I wanted to mention that these payments, carer payment and carer allowance, they're only paid for when there's personal care needs and when you're providing that, like you are physically providing that personal care. Now, with people getting older, there's often a lot to be done in terms of administrative stuff. And I know there's a lot of people who are doing a lot for their elderly parents in terms of organising aged care services, ordering groceries to be delivered, negotiating with the different allied health services, getting a cleaner to come in, getting a gardener to come in, managing someone's financial affairs, going and looking at nursing homes. There can be a lot of stuff that takes like numerous hours a week. But all of those things that I've mentioned are not considered caring duties for the purposes of these Centrelink payments. And that's a bit to get your head around, because some people think, I am doing so much. It takes a lot of my week to organise all this stuff that my elderly mum needs. And it's true, it does. But that is not considered personal care for Centrelink purposes. And you cannot claim this payment if what you're doing is more of the administrative, financial support, that kind of stuff. It's tricky because it does take a lot of time, but it's not recognised by Centrelink as part of personal care. Yeah, I just wanted to put that in there because that's something that it can cause a lot of difficulty for people who think that maybe they assume that they'll get a payment because they really are doing a lot. Also, for people who maybe they go around 2 days a week to their parents' house, they do all the gardening, they do the cleaning, they make sure the cupboards are full with food, they cook for their parents and fill the freezer. Those things are wonderful, and it's so good that you're doing that for your elderly parent, but it's not considered personal care and it will not be paid by Centrelink. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there because there are so many people doing a lot in terms of helping their elderly parents, helping them to stay in their home, doing all this stuff, but it doesn't count as personal care.
Thank you so much. That is so helpful and a really much appreciated clarification. Thank you again, Rebecca.
Not a problem.